Hardwood floors are particularly popular in kitchens and hallways. But since these are always high traffic areas, it's important to buy the right material and use the right installation methods. To find out more, we're in the Twin Cities at the Hardwood Floor Store, talking with owner and wood flooring expert, Dick Becht. Hardwood floors have been around in what seems like forever. But Dick, there are more materials and products to choose from today than ever before. What are some key points a member should be thinking about when they plan a hardwood floor project?
I think the key thing you should know is there's three types of wood floors. There are solid 3/4-inch hardwood floors, there's engineered floors, and there's floating floor systems. And then, of course, you have your laminate floors that look like wood but are not.
Now, you mentioned three products: solid lumber, engineered, and floating floors. What are the differences?
Well, the difference is the type of subfloor that you're going to use them over the top of. You've got your solid wood floors, and they are actually straight lumber. They have a tongue and groove that go over plywood or farm boards, or what we call like a 2x8 or a 1x8.
Those would be farm boards.
That would be farm boards.
Okay. Now, this is 3/4-inch thick, isn't it?
Yep, 3/4-inch thick, and it comes in different thicknesses, but this one's a 3/4-inch thick product. And then you have your engineered product. Now, your engineered product is like a piece of plywood. It's 3 or 6 layers of wood running different ways, so it doesn't swell and shrink.
But it is solid lumber at the top.
Yes, exactly, and almost the same. This particular one's almost the same sandability as a solid 3/4-inch. And this product was designed to go over chipboard, particle board,
or OSB, that kind of thing.
Or OSB, or even concrete if you want to glue her down. So again, it's designed to go where this product can't go.
Okay.
Okay. And then we have another product, and that's your floating floor systems. Now, your floating floor systems are engineered products too. But it comes in panels 8 feet long that you actually use your glue, and you glue them together, and you tap them together, and they sit over a cushion of foam.
So these are just laid in place and glued together.
Right.
And this one is installed how?
Individually, one board at a time, stapled down or glued down. So once you put this floor down, it looks just like a solid 3/4-inch hardwood floor. You couldn't tell the difference.
So no matter which of these floor products you choose, the underlayment really is a key consideration making your final selection.
The first thing you need to know is what type of subfloor you have is going to determine what product you go with.
Now, how do you determine the longevity of the floor? How do you know which type of floor system will actually last the longest? Is it the finish?
Well, most people think it's the finish, and that's what most places when you go into, they talk about the finish, they talk about the warranty, but I think the key thing you need to look at is the sandability, the renewing of that product.
Now, Dick, you mentioned sandability. Now, what is that exactly?
It's actually, if we're talking about an engineered product, we're talking about the top layer that I'm able to sand after you've used your floor for 15 years and you've done your buff and coats. That's for me being able to come in there and sand that floor after that finish is worn out.
So, based on these three types you've mentioned, which is going to be the most durable?
Well, actually, every product that I mentioned to you, engineered, floating, and solid, depending on the product that you go with, they all have almost the same sandability if you pick the right product out.
Now, if I'm putting down a raw floor, I'm going to be finishing it myself. You can get oil-based polyurethanes and water-based polyurethanes. Is there a big difference between these two?
Your oil-based urethane is going to darken. It's going to bring that patina up. It's going to give it a little more ambering tone to it. And then we have water-based, and we also have waterborne. And I'm going to stick with waterborne because that's what we mostly recommend for hardwood floors. And that's a chemically reacted product. It's a 2-part system. So it holds up for scuffing and wearing a lot better than our oil-based urethane does. So again, a very good product, and that's what I would recommend for high traffic areas.
Well, the Nelsons felt like it was time to remodel this post-war kitchen. It was dated both in the cabinetry and in the ceramic tile floor. Now, they chose oak hardwood, and to begin to put that down, they first had to take off the existing ceramic tile. Once they did that, they found these diagonally installed 1x8s as a subfloor. We had to patch this spot over here, and also we needed to refasten all of the loose boards. So we used 1 3/4-inch, 1/2-inch crown staples to reattach all of those and create a nice solid sub base for the installation of the oak. Now, the joists go across this dimension in the room, and we'll be installing the hardwood perpendicular to that, and that'll maximize the strength. Now, because the subfloor is installed at a diagonal, it would be possible to install the hardwood parallel to these joists. That would work here. Now, the homeowners have selected a 1x2 red oak floor. It matches the dining room, but they've also chosen a walnut accent strip to dress the room up. The kitchen is 12 by 12, quite typical for this date, with a 5 by 9 breakfast nook on the end. There's a doorway to the back hall, which leads to the back door and also to the basement stairs. Now this is Russ Jahola. He's the flooring contractor we're working with on this job. Hi, Russ.
Hi, Barry.
Now you're putting red rosin paper down to stop the dust, right?
That and reduce squeaks primarily.
Okay, great. Now you've made these marks against the floor. What's that for?
That's to indicate where the floor joists are so I can nail into the joists as much as possible.
Terrific. Good. Let me give you a hand. Roll out the red rosin paper. Cut and fit as needed to cover the entire floor. Secure the paper with 5/16 staples, placed about 10 to 12 inches apart. Overlap the edges at least 2 inches. Coverage is more important than perfect alignment. Create a layout line on the floor by measuring in equal distances from the outside wall, then snapping a chalk line at the marks. Measure the distance to the opposite wall. If the difference is more than ½ an inch, cheat the layout line half the difference to square it. Begin in the corner. When you're happy with your design, begin the installation at the long wall. Mark the length of the border on the floor and cut the first row to fit. The border will turn into the room where it meets the future cabinets. Measure from your layout line to set the pieces in place because the layout line is guaranteed to be straight. Always work safely when using pneumatic tools. They can be dangerous.
There you go.
Nail the first row through the top. The border detail requires us to reverse the flooring so that the tongue is to the outside. Nail the border pieces through the groove, holding your gun at an angle. Always pre-drill if you're hand nailing. Carefully set each nail. Any protruding nail head will hold the next piece away and create a gap. Cut the second row back 1.5 inches at each end. Use the width of the flooring as your measuring guide. Double check your fit before nailing it into place.
For this starting row, we're going to...
The first walnut piece is installed 3 inches from the wall.
Make that border work.
Check the fit of each piece. This walnut stock was nearly a 1/16 inch narrower than the oak stock. Continue to install the border, stepping the ends back in each new row. Use a knife blade rather than a pencil to ensure exact measurements. Completely install the border along one wall. Set the nails for each row as you go. Use flooring scraps to space each new row, marking and cutting only one end. Create a layout line for the border on the end wall. Place it several inches inside the border location so that it remains visible during installation. Locate the first piece on the end wall border by measuring from the new layout line to the end of the original piece of flooring laid. Use that measurement and set the first row parallel to the line. Nail this row through the face. Glue the end of the second row and slide it into the space. Any dry glue will be sanded off the floor before finishing. Squeeze the flooring tight with a pry bar as you nail it. Install each piece the same way, stepping back the left end just as you did on the first wall. Now, Russ, when you set up a floor, you stagger these first with the long down to the short. Now, why is that?
Well, I try to use up all my lengths as I'm going through the floor so I don't get all the long ones or all the short ones in one spot.
Okay.
And then when I stagger it like this, it makes it easier to keep the ends staggered because you don't want the ends close together.
Right.
I like to have about 6 inches on them.
Okay.
And then on the next bunch, I'd start with like a 3-foot bundle or a 4-foot bundle and lay them up against this run.
So the next set of pieces are all going to be the same length.
Right, or similar length.
And they'll still be staggered then.
Right.
Wonderful. Lay out 10 to 12 rows on the floor, staggering the joints as you go. Then install them all at once. This method really increases your installation efficiency. An air-powered stapler is the standard tool in the industry for floor installation. It's fast, easy, and available at rental centers. Staple into the floor joists as often as possible. Stay 2 to 3 inches away from the ends to avoid splitting. This row stops at the border. Mark a square line from the inner piece of border to determine its length. Just use glue to install a piece this small. Run the remaining rows into the border location. They will be cut off later. Sight carefully or measure lengths. Each row must extend into the border return. Now, Russ, when we come up against the border here, we're going to have a gap here that's not going to be a full width. What are we going to do with this?
Well, we're going to have to rip a piece. Looks like a little over 1/2 inch to fill in that last gap.
Use a pry bar to squeeze this piece tight. Nail it in, working from one end to the other. Cut the piece on a table saw, then remove the bottom of the groove. The piece is shaped like an L. Use a block plane to bevel the edge and plane the piece to the final width. Dry fit the piece, then install it. Glue is all that's needed to hold it in place. A piece of flooring upside down prevents damage while hammering the piece in. Once sanded, this narrow piece will be nearly invisible. To make the border return, chuck a straight bit in the router and set the edge of the bit so it just makes contact with the cut piece of flooring. Nail down a straight piece of flooring against the router base to provide a guide for the router. Set the other end the same way. Set the cutting depth to 3/8 inch and make your first pass. Reset the bit for the full thickness of the flooring to make your second pass. This time the bit will cut completely through the flooring and give you a perfectly straight edge to work off of when you install your border. Use a fluting bit to cut a spline groove into the ends. These bits are available from catalogs and specialty suppliers. Use consistent downward pressure to assure a straight groove. Route a groove on the end of each border piece to accept the tongue of the existing floor. Now, Russ, what are we doing with this piece right here?
It's going to help keep all of these ends from floating,
Now, we can't glue this piece. Why not?
because we need to leave these boards expand and contract. That's why we're putting a spline in there instead of just gluing it.
All right. So that allows these to move as they change with humidity level in the house.
Correct.
And still keeps them nice and tight with the spline.
Right, it holds the floor together.
Great.
Uh-huh.
Okay, good. Can we tap that in there first, or is it okay?
Well, we'll just put this on there.
Spline stock can be manufactured on the table saw or purchased from the flooring manufacturer. Continue the border installation, matching the corners as you go. Borders can be complicated, so take your time and think things through. The transition at the doorway may look difficult, but it's really a matter of applying the same techniques. Route a groove into the existing floor and install a full width piece tongue into groove. Measure and fit the remainder, then cut out the bottom of the groove. The finished piece looks like an L. Use glue to hold it in. Nails are unnecessary and can split the stock. The doorway looks as though full pieces were used throughout. Careful fitting has yielded a near seamless joint. The installation is complete. We're ready to sand the floor. Always use safety equipment when performing any sanding operation. Begin with 50 grit paper for the first pass on a new installation. This is the deepest cut and will flatten the floor and eliminate height variations. Always sand with the grain. When the flooring changes direction, move the machine to remain parallel with it. Putty the cracks before making the second pass. This joint filler is specifically designed for hardwood floors and will cure in about 20 minutes. It's available from most hardwood floor distributors. Make the second pass using 80 grit paper. 50 grit paper in the edger will leave sanding marks that cut across the grain, so make the second pass using 80 grit paper in it to minimize the swirl marks. Use a scraper to get into corners where the edger can't reach. A final hand sanding should be done in doorways and other highly visible locations. Russ recommends a buffer with an abrasive pad for the final two passes. This ensures that the floor will be level and the sanding patterns will match, giving the finished floor a uniform appearance. Vacuum the floor thoroughly to remove as much dust as possible. It's also wise to vacuum any window ledges or surfaces that could rain dust down on the floor and mar the finish. For better control, use a quality nylon bristle brush to apply the waterborne finish at the edges. Follow the grain of the wood using a lamb's wool applicator. Use smooth, even strokes to level the finish. When the first coat is completely dry, usually about 2 hours, apply a second coat in the same way. let it dry, buff the floor, vacuum, and then apply the final coat. Although the walnut border can be a substantial time investment, it's a cost-effective way to provide a dramatic accent. Installing a hardwood floor, especially with an accent border, requires patience, but the result is well worth the effort.